Okay, good evening. Welcome to the latest installment of Building the Scottish State with myself, Dr. Mark McNaught, here on the 28th of April. And I have the great pleasure to welcome back to the show Neale Hanvey MP from Alba. And so we're going to be talking about the path forward on independence in a time was kind of bleak in terms of the referendum, the prospect of a referendum soon. So first of all, thank you for being with us, Neale, as always.
Oh, you're welcome. It's always joy to join you in person or to listen in, Mark.
Absolutely. So let's just kind of run down where you see the independence movement at this time, and we were just talking before the show started about the declining polls, the fact that there's nothing tangible to lock onto, and it's as if the SNP is expecting people to campaign even though there's nothing to campaign about, no date or anything like that. How would you assess it?
Well, I think all of those concerns are entirely valid, and I understand why there is some trepidation in the movement about what exactly is going on. The SNP have focused on the cost of living crisis, but in I have to say, quite a banal way, with their ease the squeeze tagline. It really, I find that it actually really fails to capture the real pressure that exists as a consequence of continued control by Westminster Conservatives. This is not a squeeze. This is a cost of living catastrophe. There are people in my constituency who really are struggling to get from one end of the day to the next. And so if I can just give you a simple stat, the local food bank, I visited the Kirkcaldy Food Bank this week, and it used to cost them about £3,000 a month for their shopping. That's now up to £23,000 a month because the need is so great. And so there's a very real problem there. And to talk about easing the squeeze in a local election and to completely ignore the constitutional issue, I think is unforgivable, really. And we are focusing on independence as an immediate priority, and we have done since the inception of the party, and we will continue to put that as a key priority. But we've also got some additional important policies around the cost of living catastrophe that's happening, but also majoring on women's rights and protections, and a range of other policy areas. But in terms of that fundamental question about independence, we participated along with others from across the independence movement in Dunfermline recently, and Alec spoke at that meeting on behalf of Alba, and he made some really important points that speak directly to the question that you've just asked, which is, whether there will or won't be a referendum next year. And what he said is what the independence needs is not a date. What the independence movement needs is a strategy. Mm-hmm. And that really, in my view, expands the work that we need to do well beyond this single objective of obtaining a Section 30 order, and makes a much more engaging argument that pulls in all of the different potential strands and pieces of work that are necessary to advance the cause of independence. Because if we throw all of our hope into the delivery of a Section 30 order and ignore all of the other routes to independence and the work that's necessary to progress them, then we will probably find ourselves disappointed yet again in the coming months, because confidence is very low. Mm-hmm. That the First Minister will obtain a Section 30 order, or if she even wants to obtain a Section 30 order.
What's your reading on that? Do you think she's? I mean, I'm not to psychologically analyze that, but I mean, what do you think of the variables which kind of prevents her from being more forthright, setting a date, and bringing together the movement, because there's been so much good work done on, a constitution, money, currency, all that stuff. It's out there. The work has been done, but it doesn't seem to be that the SNP is willing to bring on board a lot of this really excellent research that's been done. Yeah. And so they're coming out supposedly with some prospectus. I don't know when, and I don't know who's writing it, and I don't know how, what depth it will have, but it seems as if it's really up to the Yes movement to begin this planning, because it doesn't seem to be being conducted effectively at any rate by the SNP government.
I mean, I pay attention to a couple of those points. So the work that the SSRG has done, yourself and along with others, around the potential routes and arguments to assert independence, the work that Tim Rideout and the Currency Group have done, and many others, Ian Grant, the work that he's done, and indeed the work that we've done with Robin McAlpine and others with the Wee Alba book. All of these ideas are the result of concerted and consistent effort, and along with a whole range of other voices in the independence movement, they seem to be swatted away by the leadership of the SNP as irrelevant or unimportant or not good enough or unrealistic, or a whole range of different rather, I find, pejorative responses to that effort have come from the centre of the SNP. And I think when I look the other directions, and certainly when I was in the SNP group and when I was in the party latterly, what I'm failing to see is not just the lack of content, the lack of activity to generate new arguments, but an absolute absence of the political will to drive the arguments in the movement forward. And so from 2016, from that golden opportunity of the Brexit vote, where we were given a very clear signal by the First Minister that this is it, we're going to go for it, we then found ourselves in the most ridiculous position that all of the effort and energy was spent trying to defeat the legitimate vote of the English people of their Brexit, and to argue against Brexit. Now, I wasn't happy about the Brexit vote, and I don't think Scotland should have been taken out of the EU against our will. But it's one thing to stand up in Westminster and say Scotland will not be dragged out against our wishes. And it's quite another thing to have the political will to do something about that. And nothing was done about that. Nothing serious was done about that. And certainly the, my disappointment with the lack of activity in my time in the SNP group was really quite significant, and I just lost all confidence that there was a real drive or commitment from certainly that group, or indeed from the centre of the party, to do anything serious. So, that's another thing that Alec has ably demonstrated many times in the past, and that is why he is the only person since 1314 to take Scotland anywhere close to independence with the vote in 2014. And that all comes down to his political determination and will to drive forward ambitious policies. And if you look at the Scottish government now and try to find an ambitious policy, you'll be left wanting.
There are quite a few very divisive policies that they put forward, but okay. And what do you? And we were speaking before about the possible routes to independence that we explored in the with the SSRG. We had our first roadshow last week where we talked about the manifesto for Indy, a Section 30 order. Without a Section 30 order, Alf Baird talked about decolonization, and also a plebiscite election that I believe that Angus MacNeil has advocated, or at least is. So, what do you think is the most plausible way at this point? We in the SSRG, we developed this, the idea that the Scottish MPs could simply withdraw from the Treaty of Union, which, it'd be given that it is a bilateral treaty between two sovereign states, and that under international law, not under English law, but under international law, if someone is dissatisfied or the contract has been, the treaty has been breached, Scotland's quite within their right to withdraw from that. But as you were saying, there just doesn't seem to be that appetite for that anything like that within the SNP MPs.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the last SNP conference that I attended was one of the online events. And I led the discussion across a range of groups on our engagement with the international community and what shape that should take in terms of building confidence, not just in Scotland, but in the international community, and developing their understanding of the need for independence.
Absolutely.
And that was a core ambition of the party. That was a core need for the independence movement, and it was therefore fundamentally a responsibility of SNP colleagues in Westminster, because and this is one of my key arguments about why the plebiscite needs to be a Westminster plebiscite, which is that members of Parliament and UK Parliament, under the current constitutional arrangements, they have the facility to engage with the embassies and ambassadors of all nation states that are represented in London, and therefore it is a core part of our duties to reach out to the international community within that context and begin the conversation about, well, what would you think about an independent Scotland? What kind of mechanism would you feel comfortable with? I know that you've had conversations with folk in EFTA and various other organisations to understand their perspective, but it really has to come from the politicians as a collective force to make that connection with the international community, to understand their concerns, to understand, as I said, the shape of that pathway to independence, and to help them understand some of the nuances that they probably don't get about the claim of right, the sovereignty of the Scottish people, the different legal system, the different mechanisms to challenge those in power within the Scottish legal system, and really to expand their understanding of where Scotland fundamentally is. And there was an agreement within that meeting at the SNP that yes, that's something that SNP parliamentarians should be advancing. That's something that they should be doing, and nothing at all has happened. Now, I mean, they'll probably. I'm now, a year out of the SNP group, and they'll probably pop up here, there, and everywhere to say that, oh yes, we're taking that work seriously. Well, I saw absolutely no evidence of that, and I see no evidence of that in the contributions that they make in Westminster. So, there is a complete lack of political direction and momentum within the SNP to drive independence, and I see that both in Holyrood, in Westminster, and quite sadly in the lack of ambition for Scotland in the policies that are being taken forward by the SNP and government.
Okay, and this ties in with another question I'd like to ask. How does Neale propose that Alba councillors, assuming there are some elected, can advance the cause of independence through local government? I would suggest, depending on how well Alba does, especially among pro-independence voters, could have a significant effect on the next Westminster election if there's the fear of God is put into certain MPs. But how do you see that in terms of the Alba councillors working towards independence?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's old school kind of politics where I value and haven't been a councillor. I value the efforts of those in local government as much as I value the efforts of everyone at each level of government. But just take for one example the efforts of Alba councillors, and I'll focus directly in on Chris and Jim McElhenney in Inverclyde, and then they've been able to put into place some of the policies outlined in the Alba Party's 5-point plan on poverty. So they're beginning to make progress through those ambitions. And what better way to demonstrate the opportunities of independence than to show the people who are most significantly impacted by the wiles of Tory policies in Westminster, that there is a different way, that there is a different choice that can that politicians can make to lift them out of poverty or to ease the burden of poverty on them, than by taking action in your local authority area. And what we've seen, again, with the lack of and the dissipation of political will within the SNP, we've seen the local authorities ease into this sort of pre-SNP majority comfortable position that's almost like the old New Labour viewpoint, which was, well, you know, we try our bit, we're mitigating here, and, you know, it's all very, very difficult. And actually, what Chris and Jim have demonstrated is that, you know, poverty is a political choice, and you can either accept it, and you can, as the Scottish Government are doing, make the job of local government harder by ever shrinking their budgets, or you can take meaningful action, and you can lift some of the most affected people in your community, lift them up out of poverty, give them some sense of opportunity and direction. You know, one of the key things that we're striving for is to open all sporting facilities to under 18s for free, and to extend that to some of our older people so that their health and well-being can be enhanced by physical activity. And, you know, these are quite straightforward, low impact policies that take a fraction of Scotland's annual budget, a very small fraction of the annual budget. But if you have the political will to drive those policies forward and make a difference in people's day-to-day life, and that, you know, and nothing more apparent to them than what happens in their local community, then you can begin to change the pessimism and hopelessness into something more approaching optimism and the ability to lift their gaze to the horizon and think of a better future. So, you know, all levels of government working collaboratively to improve the life chances of the people of Scotland has to be an overarching objective for anybody who's engaged in independence, because fundamentally that's why we're doing it. We're doing it because we want to improve the quality of life of everybody in Scotland, because we know that it could be so much better if we weren't under the yoke of Westminster Tories.
Okay. All right. I was on Roddy's show on Sunday with Kenny McCaskill, and he has talked about holding a conference after the local elections. And as you may be aware, the SSRG is currently planning holding a series of road shows, and we have a meeting planned in Dunfermline at the Carnegie Center there, the 28th, 29th, and 30th of the 29th, 30th, and 31st of July. And so what would you suggest that be the content of such a one? Because we've got speakers lined up. We've got Tim Rideout. We've got others that are going to speak about different areas of policy. But how would you see? I mean, do you think that, you know, all politicians are all should be invited to see whether they participate or not? What is your feeling on that? And because we want to invite, of course, people from civil society. It's not just going to be so what are your thoughts on that as to what, you know, who, you know, should all politicians, you know, should all Westminster MPs and MSPs be invited? I mean, we do have a limited capacity, but what is your view on that?
I think there's a need to open the discussion as widely as possible. And I wouldn't limit any such a convention to just independent supporting politicians either. I think we've got to we've got to move the conversation forward, and that's one of the reasons why I feel very comfortable with Alba continuing to progress as a political party, and there is a desperate need for that different voice in the independence movement, because the SNP have become an obviously centrist party. They have policies that I am deeply uncomfortable with, and therefore I am very happy to be in a much more left of centre party with Alba. But there's a need to hear all of the voices. If we're serious about moving the discussion forward, then we need to have the ability and facility to listen to every voice in Scotland, across civic society and through political life. At the end of the day, if people don't want to engage with the conversation, that gives a very strong message itself. Because we all know that the current situation is not sustainable. And so there's a need to return some respect to political discourse in Scotland. I think the whole GRA debate has completely poisoned the well, not just about that particular issue, and completely unnecessarily. It did not need to be this way, but we need to refresh the well. I think the objective that we have to have a constitutional convention, have that discussion, is the right thing to do. We've demonstrated our participation at the NDX meeting in Dunfermline, with Alec appearing alongside Douglas Chapman and others from the movement. I think we have to move forward. I think the big challenge in the minds of so many people is we have to regroup as a movement and assert ourselves. And this is not an Alba attempt at ownership at all. We have to assert ourselves as a movement with a direction and a purpose, and a leader of the movement will emerge from that process. And whether that leader is a politician or a civic leader or someone else, that would and should be guided by a convention. I think what's clear to me is that if the leadership of the SNP do not feel they have the ambition to lead the independence movement, then we must take the leadership of the independence movement away from the Scottish government and assert and drive that forward separately.
Okay, a couple of questions from the chat. What would Alba do for the pensioners, and how would you? I mean, if you were starting a campaign now, what do you think is the type of planning that needs to be done, and and substantive policy planning about pensions and many other issues as well? What is your view on that? And
well, I mean, there's some practical things that can be done immediately. So one of the things that we're calling for in this election manifesto is for doubling of the winter fuel payment for pensioners. And also, as I said earlier, access to recreational facilities to help with their health and well-being. But, we've got a fundamental problem in the UK. We have the lowest pension of any developed nation. And I speak to pensioners regularly, even before the cost of living issues came to the fore. And they are deeply frustrated. They really are financially struggling. And that situation will never improve under Westminster control. I mean, the priorities of Boris Johnson's government, even if he goes, the priorities of whoever comes in next won't change. They are quite happy to protect the big fuel companies' profits. They are quite happy to protect the profits of their colleagues who, took huge sums of money from the Treasury during the COVID crisis. And, to the shock of many people up and down the UK, they can't believe that they have taken these millions and millions of pounds that were put through a VIP, contracts that were put through a VIP line for products that are completely unusable or will expire before the time that they're able to be used. And there is no sense of shame or contrition or that any idea of wrongdoing. And, you know, whilst that's unbelievable to most people who try and live a decent life, when you look at the person who leads the country and their inability to be humbled by their own extravagance and disregard for the rules that they set for other people, then you know, we are really in a morally bankrupt union. And you know, if we can't look after our older people, but we can siphon money from the treasury into the pockets of already extraordinarily wealthy people, then there is something seriously wrong. But we've got to articulate that in a way that builds confidence in the older population, because it will not improve without independence. We will not be able to redress that deficit in the pension. We'll not be able to deliver a pension system that respects the contribution that people have made throughout their lives to the country, and that allows them to live in comfort in their, you know, their older years. Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, independence is a gateway to solve so many problems, but it is just a gateway. At the other end of that argument comes the real political battle, and I think that's why Alba, within the context of Scottish politics, is important, because there's now a plurality of voices in the independence movement. You know, whether that's the SNP, us, or you know, well, I don't know if the Greens are serious about independence at all, but you know, we need that plurality of voices. And you know, I think we prepare ourselves for an optimistic view of independence, but you know, some people have been really quite badly, their confidence has been quite badly dented by the First Minister's pursuit of gender politics over and above any priority, any other priority, and particularly of note, the priority of independence.
Yeah. Okay. And are you aware that Scotland has a constitution? I know you are. We just talked about it before, but ergo Section 30 is BS. And we were speaking about this before, but there is the claim of right. There is the, you know, the Treaty of Union, and as Sarah Saliers has so articulately pointed out, there is it's basically a get out. You know, it's a get out clause. And you know, the claim of right, but that very few people know about it. I mean, it's just Sarah and others in our group that have been kind of unearthing this, you know, this constitution that's still equally valid. What do you think is key? I mean, certainly we're in the SSRG, we're, you know, doing as much as we can to, you know, educate people on that. Do you think that most politicians are aware of it and have any incentive to actually use it?
Well, I know that you guys, the SSRG, have written to the members of Parliament, and with a rather disappointing result. But you know, there's a conversation to be had about that, and you know, I think there have been a few things that have gotten in the way over the past few months, but you know, Sarah and I have had a chat a couple of times about buckling down and doing a piece of work around that. My hesitation about speaking too loudly about this at the moment is really one of caution rather than disinterest.
Right.
Because
I was going to ask about that, if you felt that's something you could propose in the Parliament, or, you know, make a motion or something like that, just to gauge the.
It's not. I mean, I think what I would say is it's not something to be done lightly, because what I'm nervous about doing is introducing something that's not quite cooked, that hasn't had that important piece of work that I spoke about a little moment ago about engaging with the international community, that hasn't quite got the various arteries and tributaries ready to be able to shift from one argument to the next. We need to be very smart about what we do. We need to interrogate all of the arguments, not just from a position of passion. Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. It'll work. because we have to be prepared for a response that might be disappointing, that might be recognized by the international community. And we don't want to find ourselves again locked into a single argument without any facility to switch lanes and to be ready to move in a different direction in response to some of the defences that absolutely will be put up by the UK government. So I want to exercise some of those questions with Sarah, and we have been planning a meeting for some time, but we will get it in the diary very soon. And so I will use all of the. We've had this conversation as well, Mark. But I need to have I think I need to have some detailed discussions to get my arguments clear, and what would be ideal. And I think this all comes back to that fundamental point of political will and having the leadership and direction that's necessary to galvanize the troops to make a move. And, so I think those discussions, whilst full of optimism and hope, we need to also temper that with some reality of the challenges. So we need to challenge ourselves, really interrogate those arguments, and use all of the resources that are available to people like myself to make sure that we understand potential responses to those proposals before we launch into any action. But we do have to do that pretty smartly, because my big fear is that it would be a gift to the unionist movement, or to the UK government now, to say, yeah, here's your Section 30 order, on you go, you've got 6 months to do it. And we're not ready. We're nowhere near ready.
Yeah.
And certainly the First Minister's thinking is not anywhere close to that. The promised enabling legislation hasn't even been proposed. Nobody has any idea what shape that's going to be. I mean, it's just all so... Sorry, what were you saying? It's all just incredibly loose.
Yeah.
And what we can... I've got an echo coming in. Is find ourselves going forward with a bit of a half-baked plan. I'm not suggesting for a second that Sarah's arguments don't stack up, but I've listened to them carefully, and what she says makes great sense. But that doesn't mean that the world and Scotland are ready for it. So we've got a job to do to educate the international community. But most importantly, I mean, it's not just about making sure that politicians understand those arguments. We need to make sure that the Scottish people understand those arguments, and that will involve, a lot of us working very hard, going out and promoting these ideas, speaking to people, organising events that talk about independence across a range of different options, and build that optimism, enthusiasm, and direction. Ultimately, what I would like to see is that that there is a plebiscite election that is fought on a mixed party ticket, that people from different parties are elected on an independence ticket, so not a political party manifesto, but an independence movement manifesto. And that manifesto would be to go down to London and to begin negotiations for the independence of Scotland, to reassert Scotland's independence. That's the confidence, that is the guts and gumption that we need to go down there. To go down there and say, we will be good parliamentarians and we'll play by the rules. Well, that's not going to get you anywhere. And we've seen that. We've had 8 years of not getting anywhere.
Okay. And what do you have you demuted me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Good. What do you think of the realistic what do you think is a possible scenario for that occurring? I would think that Alba doing well in the upcoming elections would be a positive step towards that. And then, assuming when's the next Westminster election supposed to be in 2024, if it's not called before. So, and I would think that we could start, kind of planning for it, planning for independence collectively through our group and others. But do you think that and you were noting that many in the SNP in Westminster don't share the same enthusiasm that you do for independence and seem quite comfortable where they are. Can you see a scenario under which Alba's performance in the upcoming elections and all that could kind of put the fear of God into them and result in a pro-independent, independence majority that would actually take the necessary action to achieve it?
Well, there's the SNP party, and then there's the SNP leadership, and I think of them as two very different entities these days, and I'm sure many other people do, and it's why so many of us are now in the position that we're in a completely different political party. Because we, couldn't continue with the facade. It's difficult to know. I know there are some really good people in the SNP, some people who still have the ambition of independence, but I also know that there are some people who fall into that category who are also quite happy to go another 5 years in Westminster, and I've seen that firsthand, and it's disheartening because I struggled on through very difficult circumstances in my election campaign because I refused to surrender a seat to a unionist Labour politician, and my gamble paid off, and it was great. But then, and whilst that was encouraging, when I got to Westminster and I realised that we weren't really there to secure Scottish independence, I chose a different path because that's why I'm involved in frontline politics, Mark. I got involved in frontline politics because I want to secure Scotland's independence, plain and simple. I want to be part of the movement that achieves that objective. I don't have any ambition to be a politician forever and a day. I don't have any desire whatsoever to spend many of my days back in London. I've done that. Going to London was a necessary evil. It's not something that I aspired to do. But I have seen so many of my former colleagues, increasingly comfortable in the Westminster Village, and they've got their chums on the various different benches, and and it's nice to like people from different parties, and you do tend to do that. But one of the key objectives of quite a number of people in the SNP group is to make me feel as uncomfortable as possible. I mean, whether that's sticking their nose in the air every time they see me, or trying to find or bait me to say something controversial so they can scurry off to the newspapers with a tidbit. I'm quite sanguine about that. I kind of think, well, if that's what your objective is, then that's disappointing. But if you think that making me uncomfortable in Westminster is going to trouble me, then you're wrong, because I didn't go there to feel comfortable. I went there to secure Scotland's independence and to make that case. And so if it means that it's myself, Kenny McCaskill and Margaret Ferrier who are, on the fringes of the Scottish independence movement, then I would suggest that we are the only people who are serious about independence, because I don't see that with my former party colleagues. So I'm trying to remember back to what the original question was. I think it was
just about the scenario of using the next Westminster. Because I mean, would you run again? Are you intended to run again?
Yes, I am. Yeah. I'll stand again, and I would stand happily on an independence ticket with people who are determined. I mean, the key question in the independence movement's got to ask is, do you want somebody who is a career politician, or do you want somebody to be elected who is absolutely determined to deliver? And there are some great voices who were lost to the SNP benches in 2017, who I believe fit that fundamental bill. So people like Tasmina, Alec, obviously, Phil Boswell, and others, Corey Wilson, people who I know are absolutely heart and soul for Scotland's independence. But I also know that there are people who currently occupy a spot on a green bench who are relaxed about Scottish independence. I just think that's unacceptable. I
And I can think of at least four, SNP MPs who would probably be sympathetic to. How many more do you think there are? I mean, what percentage of the how many SNP MPs?
Yeah, it's hard to know. It's hard to know. I mean, there are a lot of people, and they'll be obvious to many people. So I won't do a roll call of the people that I've got confidence in within the SNP. Because not just because it's not fair on them, but and this comes back to the point that I'm going to make about the issue that you raised there in terms of the appetite to move things forward. The way that the SNP operates at the moment is very uncomfortable if you are someone who has an opinion and who is prepared to speak up. Because if you say the wrong thing, then there will be nasty stories leaked to the press about you. There will be, a concerted campaign even to dox you or to attack you. But it is, people look at me and look at, what's happened to me. I got sacked from the front bench for giving some woman 20 quid. Well, not some woman, Sarah Fillmore, a barrister, for giving her a donation to protect herself because one of my colleagues had potentially defamed her. Mm-hmm. So that behavior is tolerated. You can go out and defame people, but you can't assist somebody with a donation to defend themselves in such an action. So that's one example. And then there are, of course, there's the talk of Twitter at the moment around the behaviour of some of the other parliamentarians, and that the standards have not been to the exceptionally high standard that the SNP demand of everybody else. But nothing is said about that. Nothing is done about it, and so there is a partial treatment of people who are in the camp and those who are perhaps on the fringes, and so they will look at how other people have been treated, and sadly a lot of them won't put their head above the parapet or they won't speak out. I'm not built that way. I've been reflecting on that recently because I spoke in a debate this week on childhood cancer, and one of the bits that I only got 3 minutes, so I didn't really get to say an awful lot of what I wanted to say. But one of the points that I was going to make is that some people find me very direct and forthright. I tend not to sugarcoat my opinions, and I'm comfortable with that because I think that people who are politicians should have opinions, should be very clear about what those opinions are, and very direct at trying to get to the heart of matters. But the reason I probably am that way is that when I'm talking to people about the behaviours that I've witnessed or the lack of ambition that I observe, I don't really see that as difficult information because, I've sat and spoken to, young people with cancer about the fact that we're not able to continue with the treatment, or that they're, that they need to plan for the end of their life, and similar conversations with parents, and I've also gone through all of the other very difficult conversations that surround that whole world, and so for me that's tough information. For me that is where truth is very difficult to impart. So telling people that the people telling independent supporters that the people that they put their hope in are maybe not up to the job. I don't really see that as particularly difficult information. I see it as absolutely necessary information to advance the cause of independence, because if I wasn't an MP and I was out pounding the streets loyally trying to get politicians elected in the belief that they were serious about independence, and I wasn't aware of that, then I would feel like a mug. And I would want to know the truth. So I see it as an absolute responsibility to blow the whistle on this whole nonsense, because we need people. We need people with the ambition and direction and leadership skills that Alex Salmond has in spades to move the independence argument forward. And I'm not saying that that has to be Alec. That's not the point that I'm making. But his voice is and always will be hugely important in the independence movement. But we need that same strength of purpose, and sadly, that is just not present at the moment. And one of the key problems is people in the SNP are frightened to speak up because they have seen what SNP HQ and the press team are prepared to do to undermine their own side. So blue on blue,
Yeah. Okay. And can you see a kind of a strategy leading on from the question I asked before? Assuming there is, independence doesn't occur before the next Westminster election, I'm sure that there will be plenty of Alba candidates that would run for Westminster on this platform. Do you think that's a good strategy, or would that risk would that risk kind of getting more unionists elected to in Westminster, or how do you see that?
Well, there's always that risk, Mark. I think it's difficult to give a prediction of that at the moment. At the moment, it's my current position that I will be standing as an Alba Party candidate in Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath. It then would, that would be a fundamental question for the SNP. Do they want to field a candidate in Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath and therefore dilute the vote? That would be a decision that they would have to take. Same would go for the Green Party, although the Green Party decided to field a candidate in that seat during the last election. And my hunch is that was as a backup plan to field a Green candidate when they launched their campaign to take me down, which didn't go to plan. But
so this is in your last election when you were running on the SNP ticket.
Well, I was running on the SNP ticket, but they decided to launch that media attack on me after the nominations had closed. So I think my personal view, and it's just based on the evidence that I've been able to gather over time, my personal view was that was done with deliberate intention to cause me as much damage as possible. To be the guy who not only got suspended but also lost the seat to a unionist, unless, of course, they managed to parachute Scott in and he took the seat for the Greens, which, according to local independent supporters, was just never going to happen. I know that there were other parliamentary candidates in that election who knew that whole media campaign was going to be deployed against me in advance. I know of at least two parliamentary candidates who watched the news laughing and backslapping each other. So it was a complete, it was unfortunately, in my view, a complete setup by the party themselves. But to go back to your question about the next plebiscite and whether the SNP win or not, well, we'll see where we are and we'll see where they are after the May elections. But certainly we've had encouraging feedback. I've not had any negative feedback on the doorstep.
Yeah.
We've had a warm reception when we've been campaigning. You know, we're a very new party. I think we've done incredibly well in the short year that we've been around. We've got a great policy platform that I'm incredibly proud of. We've got great engagement with our membership, and we're continuing to grow members. And, you know, we're not in the doldrums like the SNP. So, you know, how they perform in this election is going to be instructive, and how we perform in this election is going to be instructive as to how the next 2 years will progress. But look, you know, I've not got a fight or an argument with anybody who's sincere about independence. You know, and I will work with anyone from whichever party who shares that ambition and is prepared to graft. I know that is what I will work with real determination to deliver. And you know, so I can't really think beyond that, because it's into typical politician answer. It's into the land of hypotheticals, and I don't talk about hypotheticals. But you know, I've kind of set out what I would like to see. It's not in my gift to deliver that, other than to put my efforts in to make it possible. But you know, there's a fundamental question around there about wrestling the notional leadership of the independence movement and placing that in a safe place away from any of the parties, potentially.
Okay, and I had a question about the local. Very quickly, I just saw a couple of comments that that any convention should include unionists or not democratic. Totally agree, and I know that you basically stated that earlier. One quip that he voted for you last time, but you jumped ship, and so he's not voting for you. I think you explained pretty well why you jumped ship, and if that person doesn't take those arguments, that's his business. But Euro, I didn't know much about Neale prior to the election, but since he is shown to be a principled MP with a lot of empathy and understanding, something the other Scottish MPs could learn a lot from. And,
thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really jump ship. You know, I just didn't. I know that everybody likes to.
You were keel hauled.
I was keel hauled and lashed. And you know, and I'm genuinely sincere about my apology. I never set out to offend anyone with the comments that I made about Palestine. I genuinely didn't use anything particularly pejorative in there. I asked what was ultimately a philosophical question. I've made a very genuine and sincere effort with representatives of the Jewish community in Parliament, and you know, Danny Stone has become what I consider to be a good and supportive friend in Parliament. He's the chief executive of the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. I fully support all the work that he does. Also, I would say the same of Andrew Percy, who's the co-chair of the Anti-Semitism APPG, and you know, we've had mature conversations about some of the challenges resolving the issue in Israel and Palestine, and neither of them believe that I'm in any way anti-Semitic. They understand that I made a mistake and that I've apologized for it. But, I've looked at some of the comments that have been made by and excused by the SNP in the time since then by other party members. And it really, I guess, I don't want to delve too deeply into that. But, it makes it clear to me that the objective was to damage me because of my views on GRA, the fact that I'm a gay man, that I led the local lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual Pride event, the LGBT Pride, Local 5 Pride, and that I had a lifetime's experience in the NHS working with these fundamental issues of safeguarding. So I had an opinion. It didn't gel with the leadership of the SNPs. I became a problem. I was told to be silent. I said that I wouldn't be silent, and then that happened. And I tried my best to go back into the SNP. And I tried my best to do a good job as a parliamentarian. And because I made a choice to support a woman defending herself. I was again dragged through the media by Ian Blackford, and I was unrepentant, and I remain unrepentant for supporting Sarah Fillmore against one of my colleagues, someone who I think has made some of the most outrageous comments about her own colleagues on social media, and I have no regrets about that. And then, my reason to go to Alba was not a case of jumping ship, but I just thought, what on earth has this party become? When someone at the stature of Kenny McCaskill, former Justice Secretary, absolutely wonderful speaker, is being berated by angry voices in your own Westminster group because he was, prepared to speak uncomfortable truths to them about a variety of issues. Then I just couldn't go along with that anymore. And I understand that some members of the Westminster Group are prepared to do that, but I couldn't keep my mouth shut. And it was, it was a position that I found myself in far too many times, defending other colleagues when the angry, virulent voices were turned on them, the attack dogs, if you like. So, I didn't jump ship. I swam for the lifeboats.
Okay. I want to wrap this up pretty soon. But I did want to, before you make your closing statement, I did want to ask a little bit about the for the STV vote for the council elections. Now, it's been said, and if you could help explain the difference, because back in the Holyrood elections last year, SNP said, vote one, SNP 1 and 2. And some 1 million votes were wasted that could have gone to Alba and made a huge difference. But as I understand it, the STV works differently, and so ranking them in that way, yeah. So if you could explain a little bit about the STV system and what and I know David Henry, who's running, he said, Alba 1, 2, 3, 4, whoever you want who's supporting independence. So. If you could explain a little bit about the system and what the logic is in voting SNP 1 and 2, or Alba 1 and SNP 2nd, or if you could enlighten us on that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think while I've got the opportunity, Mark, I'm going to apologise to the many people who are frustrated that they haven't got an Alba Party candidate to vote for. We're fielding 111 candidates, which is pretty impressive for a party that's just a year old, and who knows, if we continue to grow, we'll be able to field more candidates in the future. But in the Holyrood elections, you've got two separate ballots. You've got one ballot which is the first past the post, and that's the first paper, and then the second vote is for the regional list. So they're two separate ballot papers, two separate competitions, and they operate under different calculations. So first past the post, and then the alternative members calculation for the second paper. In STV, it's completely different. So what you're
doing, just a single transferable vote.
Single transferable vote, yeah. So what that effectively is that it's not 1 and 2 for two separate ballots. It's a sequence of preference for the candidates that are on a single ballot paper. So you have as many votes as you like. Some people call that vote to your vote. So that means that you would allocate a number or a preference to every single candidate on the list, or you can vote for as few candidates as you like. So if you've got a particular, Monster Raven Looney party, that's the only party you want to vote for, then you would put a 1 next to that party, and you don't vote for anyone else. Alternatively, if you're an Alba Party supporter, then you would vote number 1 for your Alba Party candidate, and then it's our view that our supporters should then rank in sequence independent supporting parties thereafter. Now, there are different arguments about whether you should continue to allocate numbers to the remaining candidates, probably in reversal, put your least popular one, obviously, at the end. So if you're you don't like the Tories, then they would be your last number on that ballot paper. I'm not an expert on that system, so I don't want to tell people, and I don't think it's my place to tell people how many parties they should vote for or shouldn't vote for. But I do have I do accept I've got a responsibility to explain that system. So it really is quite simple. You rank the candidates on your ballot paper in order of preference, with your most preferred candidate with a number 1 and your least preferred candidate with the concluding number. So if you find 10 candidates on there that you're prepared to give a preference to, then you rank them in order of 1 through to 10. And that is the way that it's done. What's really important is that you cannot express those preferences with X's or any other indicator ticks. If you tick or put a cross next to more than one candidate, then your ballot will be spoiled, because they can't allocate a preference. The adjudicators can't decide based on ticks or crosses who it is you want to give your first preference vote for. If, for example, somebody makes a mistake and they put an X or a tick next to one name, then that would be counted. But that's the only circumstance where adjudicators will accept a ballot. Other than that, it will be a spoilt ballot. And that's really the long and short of it.
Okay. And if you rank someone, if say in compared to just ranking say 1 or 2 first, and then and that's it, and then putting the full list for for example, ranking the Tories 10, would that be more? Would that make them less likely to be elected overall if you do put that low ranking?
No, because once you're this is the important thing. Once your preference has been counted and your candidate, your first, second, third preference candidate has been elected, then the votes aren't re-tabulated from there. It's only if your preference doesn't get elected that the vote is then cascades downwards, and they were with diminishing returns in the value of that vote. So you'll see that it goes into various different rounds. I mean, it's a computer that works this out, so I can't give you the formula of how it's done. But it's computer-based voting, and it's all what happens is that the next preference on the ballot paper then is allocated to that candidate, and you go through various rounds of voting, up to 7, 8, 9 rounds of voting before the final candidates are elected. So if you're willing to support all independent supporting parties, then it's important that you do give that preference, because it may be that if the most popular person gets elected in the first round, then all of their excess ballots will be transferred across to their next preference person.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any note of optimism you'd like to end on?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we're having a great time in Alba. I'm certainly, I feel absolutely liberated and back to what I want to do, which is to consistently argue for Scotland's independence. We're doing our We Alba book tour at the moment, bringing that message out to different parts of Scotland. We'll be continuing to do that after the election with a greater gusto. We're looking at how we can interface with other independent supporting groups to strengthen the conversation going forward. We've got ambitions for the Constitutional Convention, and we'll continue to develop our policies. But I'm really very happy with the manifesto that we've produced for the local elections. I'm very happy with the policy base that we're developing as a party. I think it's been great to see Alec on TV recently, back to his formidable self, and so yeah, things are up to things feel good.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah.
On that note, stick around for a bit after, but thank you so much, Neale, for having us, for being with us, and look forward to having you again in the next not too distant future.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
All right,
Take
thank
care.
you.